I'm Rebecca Lovelady, and this presentation is an overview of the effects on the communities in Chechnya. Throughout, I will cover how the destruction, killing, and treatment of people has affected this country. The Chechen War had significant effects on the population. When the war began, many Chechens fled to neighboring countries Dagestan and Ingushetia. This not only affected Chechnya because their population decreased, it affected Ingushetia and Dagestan also. These countries saw a significant increase in their population. Ingushetia had a 40% increase, and Dagestan had approximately 150,000 Chechens flee to their country. This caused a hardship for these countries because they did not have enough shelter or food resources to compensate for this increase in population. Because of the shortage of shelter, many Chechens lived in temporary camps called IDP camps, which stands for Internally Displaced People. Although not as many as when the war began, there are still some IDP camps today because they have nowhere else to go. Many homes were destroyed during the war, and the Chechens have no home to return to. This image shows how immense the destruction was to the infrastructure in Chechnya. This is an image of the capital of Chechnya. The top image is of before the war, and the bottom image is 3 months later. As you can see, the majority of the infrastructure is in ruins, and this had severe effects for the country. The destruction of infrastructure had many devastating effects for Chechnya. One effect was the lack of health care and social services. The hospital and many health care offices were destroyed at the beginning of the war. There was nowhere available for Chechens in need to get health care. They also saw the infant mortality rate rise to 26 out of every 1,000 live births. There was an increase in birth defects. Some Chechens believe that the Russian army used chemical weapons, and that is what is responsible for the increase in birth defects. However, this was never proven. Today, although there has been a lot of reconstruction, there is still a shortage of specialty doctors. During the conflict, many healthcare professionals fled the country and did not return. It continues to be a struggle for Chechens to get medical attention beyond general practice. One of the aspects of the Chechen War was that the Russians conducted sweep operations. These sweep operations would be to locate members of the rebel army. Unfortunately, during these sweeps, the Russian troops would detain anyone in order to interrogate them for information. The majority of the individuals detained were innocent civilians with no ties to the rebel army. In detainment, the Russian troops would use torture as a means to get information from the detainees. Electric shock, severe beatings, and stress positions were the most common used methods of torture. A stressed position is when an individual is placed into a painful position and forced to remain in that position for long periods of time. Oftentimes, detainees were killed and others just disappeared. One woman recounted that she tried to inquire about her civilian son, and he had been captured and detained for information gathering. After he had been captured, he disappeared. The woman inquired to authorities about what had happened to him, and she was threatened and told to stop asking questions. The woman stated that she quit inquiring about her son due to fear of what would happen to her if she continued to ask questions. Another aspect of the Chechen War was that Russian troops used home burning as a means to gather information and to punish the family and friends of the rebels. Many innocent civilians were forced to stand by as their homes were destroyed because they had family members that had joined the rebel army. One man reported that he was in his home watching the news on television and saw a van of soldiers pull up in front of his home. When he went outside, they told him if he didn't tell them what they wanted to know, they would burn his house down. The man told them that he didn't know anything, and they proceeded to burn his home down in front of him. Later on, when he had reported this, the human rights person that he was speaking with asked him why he didn't contact authorities, and what he responded with is that his punishment would have been far worse if he would have reported the incident to the authorities. Many Chechens haven't and won't speak out because they are afraid of the punishment that they will receive. And that's evident through the home burnings. They'll burn your home down to punish you. What's to stop them from killing you or harming you further? Economics. There are many economic hardships in the communities in Chechnya. When Russia invaded Chechnya, they destroyed the airport and any major roadways that went through or came into Chechnya, so that aid could not be easily received by the Chechens who remained in the communities. They also destroyed oil refineries and pipelines. The oil refineries and pipelines were Chechnya's main source of income. This made recovery after the war especially difficult, and it continues to be a hardship for the country today. Even though Russia has financed some of the rebuilding, they are still continuing to struggle financially. So some issues about the Chechens returning. As I discussed earlier, the population had decreased in Chechnya, and it still is lower today than it was pre-war. Today, many Chechens are still fearful to return to their communities. Anti-terrorist groups continue to kidnap and torture people, and this has been shown in the news even as of recently. Also, many don't have homes to return to. Their homes were destroyed during the war, and they have nothing waiting for them if they were to return to Chechnya. In some reports, the water in the soil is polluted in many areas. This occurred during the destruction of the oil refineries. The water in the area was polluted and the soil was polluted, and that doesn't just go away. But the main reason that Chechens do not return is the lack of regard for human rights. There is still continued conflict in Chechnya, and the Chechen people continue to be silent because of fear of retaliation. Some human rights organizations have tried to gather information from the Chechens regarding the conflict, but the majority refuse to speak. It is a war that has quieted the people in the communities through threats of punishment and fear of something worse than what they already live with. Today, Chechnya has made a lot of progress in restoring their country and their communities. It's been slow progress, and although this picture that I've posted shows a bustling city, there's still many problems that still affect the communities. It will be many more years, if ever, before the communities of Chechnya fully recover from the many years that they were at war. And thank you very much, and this is the end of the communities part of our presentation.